Hey. I am finally talking about my first DMT experience. So that's why I'm, trying to dress for the occasion, be a little colorful. If you've seen my previous video on my LSD trip, you would know that in high school I was a very irresponsible, reckless, negative person. And my LSD trip helped turn that around. It showed me a light that I had never seen before. And it got me into understanding spirituality and bettering myself. But of course, no changes overnight. So fast forward about a year, I think I was either 18 or 19. I had grown a lot as a person. I was a lot more active. I was eating healthy. I was in my first relationship, going to college, working full-time on top of that. But I wasn't completely the best person I could be yet. And I still had a lot to learn, as we always do. We're always constantly learning through life. But I was still smoking cigarettes. I was drinking a lot and even drinking and driving, which is so horrible. So I think I had no idea what was in store in my DMT trip. I knew it was going to be more intense than LSD. And at that point, I had actually done LSD several times. So I thought, I've got this, I'm a psychonaut. No, I wasn't. But it was me, my boyfriend at the time, and our friend. So we were all in a room and they went first. It was changa, so it was like a herbal blend with DMT. So it doesn't last as long as ayahuasca. My ex, his experience, he was saying that he saw a lot of zeros and ones, and I forget if he saw anything else, but so for him it seemed like it was very like a computational algorithm of the universe. And he was raised by parents who were engineers, so it made sense that he saw the universe in that type of way. Our friend, he said he was just floating through space, just like falling and floating and drifting around. So after hearing their experiences, I was like, okay, this doesn't really sound that bad. It just sounds like you're going to the inner depths of your mind. And again, for both of them, their explanation of what they experienced was pretty short and simple. It's just like a quick snippet of like some alternate universe they just entered and were a part of for, just a while. None of that could have prepared me for what I was actually about to experience. I took the hit, held it in, and then fell back, and then off I went. My trip started off with me flying through in Japan in an older time. It wasn't full-on ancient civilization. It was maybe what it would have looked like 100 or 200 years ago. They still had buildings and lanterns, but it wasn't like the neon LED Japan like it is now. I was flying over the streets through everything, and then I landed in a sushi restaurant, which was actually representative of the sushi restaurant I was working in at that time. And it was like my current sushi chefs that I worked with were in there. And so I just went up to them, and I was like I normally do when I'm like taking food orders. I went back behind the sushi bar, and then just they were doing their thing. And then all of a sudden, one of the sushi knives, it starts spiraling around, kind of like closing in a circle. And then so after that, I zoomed into another universe where everything was really buzzy. There was just a constant like buzz noise, like high-pitched buzzing, and everything was really colorful and rainbow. And then in front of me, which took up like my whole peripheral vision and front vision, were, I think it was 4 creatures. I don't know, they weren't exactly alien type things. They were kind of robotic, but they were all each a different color. I think one was red, one was blue, one was green, and one was yellow. Again, this was a few years ago, so my memory of it is not as sharp, but at the same time it is still vivid because it was such a wild experience. This part of the trip felt very machine-like, since, like I said, there was that very high-pitched buzzy noise, and on top of that, something about these creatures seemed very robotic in a sense. Like I think it was either their mouths or their eyes were kind of like spinning, kind of like in a clock, how that's kind of moving. And all of their mouths were open. And so there was like these 4 different paths, and I couldn't control which way I was going. And one just pulled me in and sucked me in towards it. It was like I was on a track and being forced into one of their mouths. And then as I was entering that, as I was entering its mouth, I know it was the 3rd one over, the sushi knife started to close around my vision again. And then I woke up in this completely other state. And it was kind of like a more present future type of scenario. And I was bleeding all over. I looked down and I'm bleeding all over. And then next thing you know, I'm in an ambulance. And in the ambulance, there is one of those, heart rate monitors that beeps, and a few doctors. And they were trying to keep me alive. And, I was bleeding to death or something, I guess. And I remember just laying there, and I heard the heart rate monitor going slower and slower. And I even saw it on the screen that my heart rate was beginning to drop to nothing. And I was so scared. Eventually, at one point, the beeping just went to the constant, heart rate stop noise, like the beep. And I saw it on the graph as it was about to go straight, and I felt everything in me give out, and then everything just went black. And that's when I woke up out of the trip, and I was freaking the fuck out. I was like, holy shit, am I dead? Like, I just died. Like, I couldn't make sense of what happened. I genuinely, because when you're in the trip, you feel like you're genuinely there. And so it really felt like I had actually died. And they were kind of laughing because they probably thought it was just like another ego death experience, which, you do experience in most psychedelic trips. They didn't realize that I had actually witnessed myself dying in an ambulance type thing. For the longest time after that, I was convinced that that is what dying felt like. If anything, that was just the DMT universe showing me a lesson. But again, the fact that I was so convinced that that was true, whether it was in another universe or it was foreshadowing what could happen, it made me stop doing a lot of the negative things I was still holding on to. Especially the fact that I was seeing myself bleed all over, and that's why I went into an ambulance. I was sure that my drinking and driving was what contributed to that vision. So after that, I completely stopped drinking and driving. Another thing I remember thinking in that ambulance was, as I was dying, I was like, I'm not ready to die. I have so much to do in life. And I think that's what it really taught me too, is I don't want to do anything that's going to risk my life because I have a purpose to do here. That definitely was scary to witness and feel what it felt like dying. And if that scares you from trying DMT for your first time, then good. Because I don't think it's something that should be taken lightly. I still think it was such a valuable experience again. And I do think, I don't know if everyone, but I do think it is something that most people could benefit from trying. But do proceed with caution because DMT can be scary. It can show you things that you don't want to see, but you need to see it. After a trip, I like to look online and see if anyone else has had similar experiences to try and help, decipher what was going on. Obviously, no one had that same exact scenario of dying in an ambulance. which I do think is something that was unique to me because of what I was doing at that time. And flying through ancient Japan, it could have meant, you know, my connection with my half Japanese heritage. And then for the rainbow creature part, that was the one that I found the most stuff about. It's the machine elves. And I was convinced it was the machine elves because that's something that every single person sees, especially with the high-pitched noise as you're like zooming in. And some people call them like the greeters, and they have all these different types of names. So it all lined up, it made sense. And those machine elves will take you into the other dimension that shows you what you need to see. And so that's why they showed me my death. But fast forward until recently, this was actually only a few months ago. So I had always been really curious in reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It was mentioned in one of my favorite movies, Enter the Void. It's been talked about a lot in various things. I think even like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins' podcast, they quickly mention it. But so yeah, I've always been very intrigued in this book, and I finally got it recently. And I was just, you know, going through a lot of like the verses, the practices, and in the middle there's a photo page. And as usual, photo pages are a little thicker than the rest of the book, so it'll naturally want to open on those pages. And so I'm just reading the book, and then it just flips open to this page. And that is this page. And instantly I was like, holy fucking shit. That is what I saw in my DMT trip nearly 5 years ago. And as you'll also see here, they are referred to, at least in this book, as the 8 gatekeepers. The crazy thing is, these are the fierce deities in Buddhism. They are the wrathful deities that are more violent than the other ones, but they're still good in a sense. They are just there to balance out the good and evil. Wrathful deities are there to break down your dark side. When you are faced with these wrathful deities, it's just a test, and you have to overcome them and show them compassion. They're all a part of the universe. They serve their purpose too. And if you have nothing wrong, nothing to hide, then you have no reason to fear them. And when you don't fear them, they will vanish away, and then you will see the beautiful, magical world around you. And I think that is what I saw around it. But again, the creatures were taking up most of my vision, but I did notice that everything around it was so colorful too. And if you don't learn how to speak to these wrathful deities, that's when you do go to suffering. You go to the dark depths of the universe. And that's probably why everything went black when I died, because I hadn't found that inner spirituality, that inner peace. And so the fact that DMT is supposedly released during death, I mean, there's mixed stuff about that, but I saw those 4 creatures that looked exactly like these wrathful deities, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead talks about how to face these deities. It has made me believe in Buddhism way more than I ever did. And it also leads me to wonder, because I think there's aspects of every religion that make sense. So it has led me to wonder if every person, are we from another universe? And is that universe dictated by the religions that we have on earth today? You know, maybe some people who are from the Middle East actually came from an Islamic universe. Maybe people, you know, in Western cultures who are Christian, maybe they actually came from another universe where Jesus and God come from. Yeah, I don't know. It's just so crazy that something that happened years ago has come back into my life now. And that's one of the reasons why I'm making this video, is because I have a new reflection on it now. I think 1 or 2 people have also asked me to make a video on it, but now I think with this new information just makes it so much more interesting. My machine elves were wrathful deities who were showing me my weakness. I actually did a second one a few years after that with my friend, and I remember laying back, and it was so crazy. I blasted off into another world, and this time I didn't see anything. I just felt voices. Like, I didn't even really hear them, but I just felt these voices communicating a message to me saying, "You're not ready," which is so crazy. Like, they were literally telling me, "You're not ready for this experience." And maybe now that I have read this book and now I know how to face demons and overcome and be more at peace with myself, maybe now it is time for my next trip. I don't know. But yeah, I'm all like, my hairs are literally rising. I'm all tingly just thinking about this because it's just so weird how instantly I was like, that is what I saw when I saw these deities. It was like everything just suddenly made sense. Yeah, that was my experience. Again, it's been so many years since I had the experience, so it might be that some parts are not as detailed as they originally were, but those were the most crucial elements of the experience, I think. And yeah, again, psychedelics are not something to be taken lightly. They can be beautiful, they can be happy, they can be peaceful, they can also be dark and scary. In the end, it all serves a purpose, but you definitely have to be mentally prepared for what is going to come. And that is why, especially with something like DMT, I have only, after that first time, I waited years to do it again. And now if I do it again, it's going to be another few years since that second attempt. And when you do get a lesson from the trip, you really have to try to apply it to your life. I think the worst thing you can do with psychedelics is just take it and not try to learn from it, not try to grow from what you learn, because then it's just a waste. You're just doing it recreationally, and that's not what it's meant to be. So I don't know, what are your thoughts? Do you think that all of us humans come from different universes? I'm also curious if most people think that DMT trips are something that is formulated by the imagination of our brains, or if it actually is taking us to some other dimension that actually is just as real as our reality. So yeah, if you found that somewhat interesting and you want to hear more about my different psychedelic experiences and you're new here, my channel is not just about psychedelics, but just overall spiritual, mental, physical health, and healing ourselves from the inside out, and me partaking on little self experiments. Please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and again, comment on what you think DMT trips are really showing us, because my mind is honestly blown. Thank you for watching, and until next time, this is Psych Heal.